Picture a rice field in West Sumatra centuries ago. A farmer bends low, working a small curved blade through the stalks. Quick, practiced, efficient. It's not a weapon. It's a tool. No different in purpose from a sickle, used by thousands of people across the Indonesian archipelago every single day. Now picture that same blade centuries later, hidden in the folds of a woman's hair, or tucked into a warrior's palm as he steps into a Pencak Silat duel, small enough to conceal completely, curved enough to hook, trap, and tear in the same motion a sickle uses to cut grain. Same object, same curve. Two completely different lives. Today, this knife shows up in video games, action films, and the kits of federal air marshals, marketed as one of the most dangerous close combat blades in the world. But almost everyone who recognizes its claw-like shape has no idea it started its life as farm equipment. This is the Karambit, and its story is really a story about how a tool for cutting rice became one of the most feared weapons in Southeast Asian martial arts. Without changing its shape at all, let's look at what actually makes a karambit, because the shape is doing almost all the work here. The blade curves inward, sickle-like, mimicking the shape of a claw. Tradition in West Sumatra credits the design specifically to the claws of a tiger. That curve is what lets it hook and slice in one motion, rather than requiring a straight push cut the way most knives do. At the base of the handle sits a ring, sized for the index finger, which does two things at once. It keeps the blade securely anchored in the hand even during fast, chaotic movement, and it allows the wielder to spin the knife between grips without ever fully releasing it. That ring is arguably the single most important design element separating a karambit from every other curved blade in the world. Most karambits are small, genuinely small, easy to close a fist around, easy to conceal in a sleeve, a belt, or, as we'll get to, in someone's hair. This isn't a knife built for size or intimidation. It's built for concealment and control. And unlike a lot of the blades we've covered on this channel, the Karambit wasn't ever designed to look impressive as a weapon. It was designed to be efficient at cutting plants. Every quality that makes it dangerous today is a repurposed farming feature. So let's go back to where that farming tool actually started. The Karambit's roots trace to the Minangkabau people of West Sumatra in the Indonesian archipelago, though it's worth being upfront that historians don't fully agree on the exact point of origin. Some accounts place its emergence specifically in West Sumatra. Others point to the island of Java. Oral tradition among the Minangkabau places the knife's origins as far back as the 11th century. Used as a smaller, more maneuverable relative of the sickles, common across island Southeast Asia, tools used for raking roots, threshing grain, and harvesting rice in dense, humid terrain where a larger blade would be unwieldy. For a long time, that's all it was, agricultural equipment. But rural life in the archipelago carried real, constant risk, banditry, tribal conflict, and colonial-era violence that could reach even remote farming communities. And farmers already had this compact, sharp, easily concealed blade on them at all times, because it was also their work tool. The shift from farm implement to weapon wasn't a redesign. It was a recognition. People realized the same curve that let them hook and slice through plant stalks worked just as well against an attacker at close range. As the Karambit's role expanded toward self-defense, its curve became more pronounced, maximizing cutting potential in a way that made it even more distinct from its farming tool ancestors. From West Sumatra and Java, the Karambit spread through the extensive trade networks connecting the Indonesian islands, reaching Malaysia, the Philippines, Myanmar, and Thailand. Each region adapting the design slightly to its own preferences, but keeping the core claw-like curve and finger ring intact. The real turning point comes with the Karambit's formal adoption into Pencak Silat, the traditional martial art of Indonesia and Malaysia, a process that scholars trace to around the 15th century. Up to this point, The karambit's use in self-defense had been improvised, born out of necessity rather than formal training. Its integration into silat changes that entirely. Silat practitioners develop dedicated, codified techniques specifically built around the karambit's unique geometry, hooking, trapping, and controlling an opponent using small, efficient, circular motions that echo the movements of a striking animal, particularly in styles like harimau, meaning tiger, where fighters deliberately mimic the slashing and clawing motion of the animal the blade itself was said to resemble. This is the moment the karambit stops being just a farmer's improvised backup weapon and becomes a formally recognized combat system in its own right, with its own techniques, its own grips, its own place in a martial tradition that's still taught today. And this formalization carries an important cultural detail that surprises a lot of people. In traditional silat, the karambit was often regarded not as a weapon of raw aggression, but of discipline, precision, and control. It was also, notably, closely associated with women in the region, carried concealed in the folds of hair for personal defense, and in some silat traditions, still specifically regarded as a feminine weapon even today. This is very different from the way modern Western media almost exclusively frames the karambit as a hyper-aggressive tactical or military tool. That gap between the karambit's cultural reality and its modern reputation is exactly where the myths start. Myth 1, that the karambit was always designed purely as a weapon of war. It wasn't. Its entire design language, the curve, the size, the ring, comes directly from agricultural tools meant for harvesting rice and clearing vegetation. The deadliest knife in Southeast Asia reputation is a much later addition to an object that spent centuries primarily cutting plants, not people. Myth 2, that it's an exclusively masculine, aggressive battlefield weapon. As we just covered, the historical reality is more layered, closely tied to women's self-defense in some regions, and regarded within parts of silat tradition as a feminine weapon associated with discipline rather than dominance. Modern tactical marketing has largely erased that half of the story. Myth 3, and this one's murkier, that karambit blades were routinely coated in exotic poisons drawn from venomous animals for battlefield use. This claim shows up frequently in popular retellings of the karambit's history, and it's plausible given the broader use of poisoned blades in some regional fighting traditions. But it's difficult to verify how widespread this practice actually was versus how much it's been amplified for dramatic effect in modern accounts. Worth mentioning, worth treating with appropriate skepticism. What's not myth and doesn't need embellishing? The finger ring retention design genuinely does make the karambit unusually difficult to disarm compared to a standard knife grip. That's a real, well-documented tactical advantage, not folklore. As Dutch colonial presence expanded across the Indonesian archipelago from the 17th century onward, European accounts began documenting local fighting traditions directly, including descriptions of Indonesian warriors carrying a kris at the waist and a spear in hand, with a karambit kept as a concealed last resort if their primary weapons were lost in the chaos of battle. Among the accounts that stood out to European observers were the Bugis, warriors of Sulawesi, known throughout the region for their skill and reputation in combat, and closely associated with karambit use even outside formal silat training, carrying the weapon's fearsome regional reputation forward into the colonial era. Through the following centuries, as Southeast Asia moved through colonial rule and into independence, the karambit's role in traditional martial arts never disappeared, even as its everyday agricultural use declined with modernizing farming methods. Filipino martial arts, developing alongside Indonesian silat, incorporated their own karambit-influenced techniques into systems like kali, further widening the blade's footprint across the region's fighting traditions. The 20th and 21st centuries bring the karambit's biggest transformation yet, a jump from a regionally known Southeast Asian blade into global tactical and pop culture consciousness. Western knife manufacturers began producing tactical karambit variants, often folding designs, a significant departure from the traditional fixed blade farm tool, marketed toward military, law enforcement, and self-defense audiences. Today, Karambits are issued as part of standard equipment for United States federal air marshals and used by special forces units in multiple countries, including Malaysia's own military. At the same time, the Karambit exploded into mainstream pop culture. Video games, action films, and mixed martial arts have made its claw-like silhouette instantly recognizable to millions of people who've never heard of Pencak Silat or the Minangkabau people who originated it. For most of the Karambit's modern global audience, the tactical, hyper-lethal version is the only version they know. The agricultural and cultural history we've spent this whole episode on has largely been left out of the story entirely. So picture that Sumatran rice farmer again, working a small curved blade through the stalks, centuries before anyone called it a close combat icon or issued it to federal agents. The Karambit's entire journey, from harvesting tool to concealed self-defense weapon to formalized martial art to global tactical symbol, happened without the blade's core shape ever really changing. The curve that let a farmer hook through rice stalks is the exact same curve that lets a modern practitioner hook and trap an opponent's arm. The object never needed to be redesigned into something dangerous. It just needed people to notice what it could already do. If you want to keep tracing the history behind the edge, hit subscribe. Every episode, we're digging into another blade that shaped a culture or a war, from the katana to whatever we're covering next. Let me know in the comments which blade you want to see traced next.